The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. I'd been up since 6, coffee made, sitting at the kitchen table with the newspaper. Robert used to read it first, business section, then sports. Now it was just me and the crossword puzzle. The house was quiet. Too quiet, even after 3 months. When the doorbell rang at 8:30, I wasn't expecting anyone. Patricia usually came by around 10 with updates from the book club. Through the front window, I saw the mail carrier holding a clipboard. Certified mail. My stomach dropped before I even knew why. Mrs. Walsh? He needed my signature. The envelope was thick, official. Return address. Whitman and Associates, attorneys at law. Not David Chen's firm. Someone else's. I carried it back to the kitchen, set it on the table next to my coffee, already gone cold. The envelope sat there for maybe 10 minutes while I just stared at it. You develop instincts for bad news at my age. This was bad news. Inside were 8 pages of legal documents, dense paragraphs, numbered sections, formal language I had to read 3 times to understand. But some phrases jumped out immediately. Contest of last will and testament, undue influence over deceased diminished capacity at time of execution, elder abuse during marriage. Brad and Jennifer, Robert's children, they were contesting his will. My hands started shaking. I set the papers down, picked them up again, read the key section again. Petitioners Brad Walsh and Jennifer Walsh Morrison assert that the decedent, Robert James Walsh, was subject to undue influence by respondent Margaret Walsh during the final years of his life. Petitioners further assert that the marriage between decedent and respondent, entered into when decedent was 58 years of age, constituted a pattern of elder abuse and financial exploitation. Petitioners request that the court set aside the last will and testament dated November 12, 2023, and distribute the estate according to intestate succession laws. Elder abuse. They were calling our marriage elder abuse. 15 years. We'd been married 15 years. I met Robert at a community center art class when I was 53, him 58. Both of us widowed, both trying to figure out what life looked like alone. We dated for 2 years before we married. Took our time. Made sure. He proposed at the same art studio where we met. Got down on one knee in front of the whole watercolor class. I can still see his face, nervous, hopeful, happy. I looked up at the mantel above the fireplace. Our wedding photo, small ceremony, just family and close friends. Brad and Jennifer were in that photo. They'd been there. Polite smiles, lukewarm congratulations. But they'd been there. The letter continued with details. The estate was valued at approximately $800,000. The house, our house, the one Robert bought 30 years before I met him, was worth $425,000. His retirement accounts, life, insurance, investments made up the rest. Under his will, I inherited the house and the primary assets. Brad and Jennifer each received $50,000. Specific bequests, Robert called them. Fair, he'd thought. More than fair, considering. But they wanted more. They wanted it all. The hearing was scheduled for 60 days from now, January 15th. I had 60 days to respond, to hire an attorney, to defend my marriage, to prove that the last 15 years of my life weren't a crime. I sat there at the kitchen table, the morning sun coming through the window the way it did every day. Everything looked the same. The ceramic fruit bowl Robert bought at a craft fair. His reading glasses still in the dish by the door. I couldn't bring myself to move them. The calendar on the wall with his handwriting marking doctor appointments that would never happen now. Everything looked the same, but nothing was the same. They were calling our marriage elder abuse. They were saying I'd manipulated him, exploited him, that he hadn't known what he was doing when he married me, when he loved me. 3 months. He'd been gone 3 months. Cancer took 17 months to kill him, but we'd known it was coming. We'd had time to say what needed saying, time to hold hands, time to make sure his affairs were in order. He'd been so clear about everything, so insistent. "I want you taken care of," he'd told me in the hospital 2 days before he died. "The kids will be fine. You're the one who needs security now." I looked at the letter again. At the bottom, in smaller print, petitioners are represented by Thomas J. Whitman, Eskiner, Whitman, and Associates. Tom Whitman. I knew that name. Robert had mentioned him once, the most aggressive estate attorney in the state, the one you hired when you wanted to win at any cost. My coffee had gone completely cold. The crossword puzzle sat unfinished. The morning had been so ordinary 20 minutes ago. Now I was holding 8 pages that said my marriage was a lie, that I was some kind of predator, that Robert, sharp, stubborn, clear-minded Robert, had been my victim. I needed help. I needed David Chen. He'd handled Robert's estate planning, drafted the will they were now trying to overturn. He'd known Robert for 20 years. He'd know what to do. But first, I just sat there, holding those papers, staring at our wedding photo on the mantel, at Robert's smile, at my smile, at the life we'd built that his children were now trying to erase. 3 months after I'd buried my husband, I was going to have to defend our love in court. I called David Chen's office at 9 that morning. His secretary said he could see me at 11. 2 hours. I spent them trying not to spiral. Robert and I met 7 years after my first husband died. 7 years of learning to live alone, of figuring out who Margaret was without being someone's wife. I'd started taking classes at the community center, pottery, photography, eventually watercolors. That's where I saw Robert, late 50s, silver hair, struggling with a landscape that looked more like a mudslide than mountains. He caught me smiling at his canvas. "That bad?" he'd asked. "The trees are spirited," I'd said. He'd laughed. We got coffee after class, then dinner, then 2 years of slow, careful courtship. We were both older, both widowed, both knew what loss cost. When he proposed, on his knee at the art studio in front of 12 amateur painters, I said yes because I was sure. Not swept away. Sure. We married when I was 53, him 58. Small ceremony at the Lutheran church he'd attended for 30 years. Brad and Jennifer came. Polite, distant. They'd lost their mother to breast cancer 5 years earlier. I understood that I wasn't replacing her. Didn't try to. I was just Margaret, their father's wife, his companion, his partner. I thought that would be enough. The early years were good. Robert worked in commercial real estate, was planning to retire at 65. I kept my part-time job at the library, shelving books, helping patrons, staying busy. We traveled some, took art classes together, had dinner parties with neighbors, normal life, married life. Brad and Jennifer visited 2, maybe 3 times a year. Brad lived 4 hours away in Columbus, worked in finance, married with 2 kids. Jennifer was closer, an hour north, worked as a teacher. They'd call Robert on holidays, send cards on his birthday. Surface-level relationship. I tried to build bridges, invited them for Thanksgiving, Christmas. Sometimes they came, often they had other plans. Robert didn't seem bothered. "They have their own lives," he'd say. "That's how it should be." I should have paid more attention to the distance, should have wondered why they never stayed longer than a few hours. But I was focused on Robert, on our life together, on building something that felt like home. Then came the cancer, pancreatic, stage 3. Diagnosed 8 years into our marriage, when Robert was 66. The oncologist, Dr. Richard Morrison, kind man, steady voice, said 2 years if we were lucky, 18 months more likely. That's when everything changed for me. Robert retired immediately. I quit my library job without hesitation. He needed full-time care, appointments, treatments, medication schedules, dietary changes. I became his caregiver, not a burden, a purpose. Over 15 years, I gave what I could. I sold my condo and moved into Robert's home. His space became ours. When cancer hit 3 years in, I quit my part-time library job to care. For him full-time. No income, just caregiving. I used $45,000 from my retirement savings to cover medical bills his insurance wouldn't touch, co-pays, experimental treatments, home health aides when I needed help. When Robert needed wheelchair access, I paid $12,000 for ramps and bathroom modifications. His children visited twice a year. I was there every day. Not martyrdom, love. I thought they understood that. Looking back, maybe they were calculating what I cost them. Brad and Jennifer's visits increased during Robert's illness. Not dramatically, but noticeable. They'd come for long weekends, stay at hotels nearby. Brad would ask detailed questions about Robert's medications, his mental state. "Is he still sharp?" he'd ask me. "Does he get confused?" "Your father's mind is fine," I'd tell him. "The cancer's in his pancreas, not his brain." Jennifer was quieter. She'd sit with Robert, hold his hand, cry softly. I'd give them space. But I noticed she'd look around the house sometimes, at the furniture, the artwork, the little things Robert had collected over 40 years, like she was taking inventory. I dismissed it. Grief does strange things. They were losing their father. I tried to be understanding. Patricia, my neighbor 2 doors down, saw things more clearly. We'd become close friends after Robert got sick. She'd stop by every morning around 10 with coffee just to check in. Patricia was 65, retired teacher, sharp as a tack, and knew everyone's business on the block. "That son of his," she'd said once, after Brad left from a visit, "walks through your house like he's measuring for new carpet." "He's worried about his dad," I'd said. Patricia had that tone that meant she disagreed but wouldn't push. Not yet. Looking back, there were signs I ignored. Brad asking Robert about the house value. "Just curious, Dad. Real estate's crazy right now." Jennifer's husband, nice man Jeff, worked in sales, asking Robert about investment strategies. "Any tips for building a nest egg?" Red flags I dismissed, as family taking interest. 6 months before Robert died, he told me he was updating his will. "Want to make sure everything's clear," he said. "Don't want any confusion later." He met with his attorney, David Chen, without me there. "This is my business," Robert said gently when I offered to come. "I'll tell you what you need to know." What he told me, the house would be mine. His retirement accounts, life insurance, mine. Brad and Jennifer would each get $50,000. "They've had plenty of help over the years," Robert said. "College paid for, cars, down payments on houses. They've had their inheritance while I was alive. You're the one who needs security now." I'd tried to argue. "Robert, they're your children." "And you're my wife," he'd said. His voice was firm, but his hand holding mine was gentle. "You gave up everything to take care of me. You've earned security. This is my decision. Margaret, my choice." I should have insisted he talk to Brad and Jennifer, should have made sure they understood, but Robert was dying and I was exhausted, and I trusted him to handle his own family. That was my mistake. Not greed, not manipulation, just trust and fatigue. Robert died on a Tuesday morning in October. 17 months after diagnosis, Dr. Morrison had been right. Hospice at home, the way Robert wanted. I was holding his hand. Brad and Jennifer were there too. They'd driven in the night before when we called to say it was time. We stood around his bed, the 4 of us, and watched him slip away. At the funeral, Brad hugged me. "Thank you for taking care of him," he'd said. Jennifer had cried on my shoulder. "You were so good to Dad." I'd thought we'd be okay. Thought grief would bring us closer. Thought wrong. The will reading was 2 weeks later. David Chen's office, all of us seated around his conference table. David explained the terms clearly. House to Margaret, accounts to Margaret, $50,000 each to Brad and Jennifer. Brad's face had gone red. $50,000? That's it? "Your father's estate is approximately $800,000, David said calmly. "The specific bequests to you and your sister were his clear instruction." "Clear instruction," Jennifer repeated. Her voice was tight. "When did he change the will?" 6 months ago, David said. "He scheduled the appointment himself. I can assure you he was of sound mind and clear intent. Brad had looked at me then, really looked at me, like he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before, something he didn't like. "We'll be in touch," he'd said. That was 8 weeks ago. Now I knew what "in touch" meant. 8 pages of legal accusations, elder abuse, undue influence, a courtroom battle over whether my marriage was real or criminal. I looked at the clock, 10:45. Time to see David. Time to figure out how to defend 15 years of my life. Patricia knocked on my door as I was getting my coat. "Saw the mail truck," she said. "Certified letter?" I showed her the papers, watched her face go from curious to horrified. Those ungrateful... She caught herself. "Honey, this is garbage. Robert was sharp until the day he died. I saw him 3 days before. We talked about the election, for crying out loud. He knew exactly what he was doing. They're saying I manipulated him. They're saying they want more money." Patricia's voice was firm. "That's what they're saying, and David's going to tear them apart in court. You wait." I hoped she was right. But hope and proof were different things, and I needed proof. That night, I pulled out the box I kept in the bedroom closet. Robert's cards, every anniversary, every birthday, every Valentine's Day for 15 years. I spread them on the bed. His handwriting got shakier toward the end, but the words were always the same. My Margaret. My love. My best choice. I read through them slowly, remembered each occasion, each year, each moment of being chosen, being loved. They could take me to court. They could call our marriage abuse. But these cards, his words, his choice, his love, were real. I needed to remember that before I walked into David's office and started fighting. David Chen's law office was downtown, 3rd floor of a renovated brick building. I'd been there once before, when Robert was updating his will 6 months ago. I'd waited in the lobby then, reading magazines while Robert handled his business. Now the business was mine. David came out to greet me personally, mid-50s, trim build, wire-rimmed glasses he adjusted when he was thinking. He'd known Robert for 20 years, handled his commercial real estate contracts, his business deals, finally his estate planning. Good man. Careful man. "Margaret." He shook my hand, then pulled me into a brief hug. "I'm so sorry you're dealing with this." His office was lined with law books, organized files, a desk that looked like controlled chaos. He gestured to a chair and sat across from me, adjusting those glasses. "I've reviewed the petition Brad and Jennifer filed," he said. "It's aggressive. Tom Whitman doesn't mess around." "What are they claiming exactly?" My voice was steadier than I felt. David opened a folder. "They're asserting undue influence, that you manipulated Robert into changing his will. They're claiming he had diminished capacity due to his illness, and they're using the term elder abuse to characterize your marriage." He paused. "It's inflammatory language designed to prejudice a judge, but we can fight it." "How?" "We need to prove 2 things. First, that Robert had full mental capacity when he executed the will. Second, that your marriage was genuine, not exploitative. We need documentation, medical records showing his cognitive state, witnesses who can testify to his lucidity and your relationship, financial records showing you weren't enriching yourself at his expense." I thought of my depleted retirement account, the $12,000 for wheelchair ramps, the years of caregiving with no income. "I can get medical records," I said. "Dr. Morrison treated Robert for 3 years. He can speak to Robert's mental state." "Good. What else? Letters, emails, anything in Robert's own words about his intentions?" I hesitated. "I don't know. Robert wasn't much for writing things down. He said what he meant out loud." David made notes. "We'll need to go through everything. Bank statements, property records, any correspondence between Robert and Brad or Jennifer. They're going to paint you as calculating. We need to show reality." He walked me through the legal process, responses due, discovery, depositions, possibly mediation, worst case, trial. The timeline stretched ahead like a long, exhausting road. "How much will this cost?" I asked. "Honestly, if we go to trial, you're looking at $30,000 to $50,000 in legal fees, maybe more if it gets complicated." $30,000. $50,000. The amounts Brad and Jennifer were each supposed to inherit. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I need to fight this, David. I can't let them say our marriage was fake." "Then we fight." He stood, shook my hand again. "Start gathering documents. Anything you can find. I'll request the medical records and subpoena Robert's financial statements. We'll build a case they can't tear down." I left his office feeling both better and worse. Better because I had a plan. Worse because the plan involved reliving every detail of Robert's illness, our marriage, our life together. Also, I could prove to strangers that my love was real. Back home, I started looking through Robert's study. He'd kept files there: tax returns, insurance papers, investment statements, all organized in filing cabinets, labeled in his neat handwriting. Even dying, Robert had stayed organized. I pulled folders systematically. Bank statements, needed those. Property deed, needed that. Life insurance policy, definitely needed. I was building a stack on his desk when I noticed a drawer I'd never opened. Bottom right. Not locked, just closed. Inside were notebooks. 5 of them, spiral-bound, the kind you buy at drugstores. Robert's handwriting on the covers, dates. I pulled one out, opened it, read the first page. It was a journal. Robert had kept a journal. I'd lived with this man for 15 years, cared for him through cancer, slept beside him almost every night, and I'd never known he kept a journal. My hands were shaking as I read. March 15th, 2023. "Margaret says I should write things down. Memory might get fuzzy with all the medications. So here goes. Day 12 of the new chemo protocol. Brutal. But Margaret makes it bearable. She sat with me through the whole infusion yesterday, 6 hours, brought sandwiches, played cards, read to me when I was too tired to focus. I don't know what I'd do without her." April 3rd, 2023, Brad called today. Asked how I'm doing. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. He mentioned the house again. "Keeping up with real estate values, Dad. I know what he's really asking. When I die, what's he getting?" Didn't say that outright, but I'm not stupid. Jennifer's been better. She visits more. But I see her looking around, assessing. They're good kids, but they've got that expectation, that assumption. Like my whole life's work is supposed to be their inheritance. Margaret never asks about money, never asks what she's getting. She gave up her job to take care of me. Used her own savings for the medical bills insurance wouldn't cover. She thinks I don't know, but I see the bank statements. $45,000 she spent, never mentioned it once. June 8th, 2023, bad day. Pain worse. Can't keep food down. Margaret cleaned up after me 3 times today. Never complained, never made me feel like a burden. Just kept saying, "We're in this together." We are. She's in this with me, more than my own children are. November 10th, 2023. Met with David Chen yesterday to update the will. Margaret offered to come, but I said no. This needed to be my decision, clear and unambiguous. David asked me 3 times if I was certain. Yes, I'm certain. The house goes to Margaret. The retirement accounts, life insurance, all to Margaret. Brad and Jennifer get $50,000 each. They borrowed money from me over the years. Brad took $15,000 3 years ago, said it was temporary, never paid back a dime. Jennifer's husband got $25,000 for some business idea that never happened, also never repaid. They've had their inheritance already, multiple times. They've had help with houses, cars, college for their kids. I've given them plenty. Margaret's given me everything. Her time, her savings, her life, basically, for the past 3 years. She's earned security. This is the least I can do. David said the kids might contest it. I said, let them try. I'm of sound mind. This is my choice. Margaret deserves this. I sat at Robert's desk reading page after page, 3 years of entries, his thoughts, his observations, his clear, rational, undeniable mind working through his life, his family, his decisions. He'd known that Brad and Jennifer would be upset, known they might fight, and he'd chosen me anyway. Not because I'd manipulated him, because I'd loved him. Tears were running down my face, but I kept reading. This was evidence, legal, documented evidence, in Robert's own handwriting, dated entries spanning years. No one could claim he wasn't competent. These journals showed a man thinking clearly, planning carefully, making conscious choices. I found the most recent entry, 2 months before he died. August 22nd, 2024. Brad came by today, asked about the house again, wanted to know if I'd consider selling while the market's hot. I know what he wants. He wants me to sell, put the money in accounts he can access when I'm gone. I told him no. Told him Margaret and I live here. This is our home. He didn't like that answer. What about after? He asked. What happens to the house after? I told him I'd handled it, that everything was settled. He pressed. I said it wasn't his concern right now. He left angry, didn't say goodbye to Margaret, just walked out. I feel bad. He's my son. But I can't let guilt override what's right. Margaret's given up everything for me. She's earned this house. She's earned security. I won't apologize for taking care of my wife. The last entry, clear, definitive. 2 months before death. No diminished capacity. No confusion. Just Robert being Robert. Stubborn, fair-minded, certain. I gathered the journals carefully, 5 of them, 3 years of documentation. I called David immediately. I found something, I said. Robert kept journals. Through the whole cancer treatment. David, they're detailed. They show everything. His mental state, his reasoning, his awareness of Brad and Jennifer's expectations. He wrote about updating the will, about his decision to leave the house to me. It's all here. Silence on the other end. Then, Margaret, that's significant. That's contemporaneous documentation. Can you bring them to my office tomorrow? I'll bring them this afternoon. Even better. I hung up and looked at the journals spread. Across Robert's desk, his handwriting, his voice, his defense of our marriage, written in his own words when he didn't even know he'd need to defend it. The journals were proof, but they were also something else. They were Robert, still here, still fighting for us, still choosing me. Patricia knocked on my door an hour later. She took one look at my face. What happened? I showed her the journals, showed her Robert's entries. She read silently, her expression shifting from curious to fierce. This is it, she said. This is what you need. Margaret, honey, they don't have a leg to stand on now. David says it's strong evidence. It's more than evidence. It's Robert telling them himself. She squeezed my hand. He knew. He knew you loved him. And he made sure everyone else would know too. I gathered the journals and put them carefully in a bag. Tomorrow I'd take them to David. Tomorrow we'd start building the case. But tonight I just sat with them. Read them slowly. Let Robert's words, his clear, rational, loving words, remind me what I was fighting for. Not money, not a house, our marriage, our 15 years, the truth. I met David at his office the next morning with the journals in a protective folder. He spent an hour reading through them while I sat across from him, watching his expression shift from interested to impressed. This is excellent, he said finally, adjusting his glasses. Contemporaneous documentation, clear reasoning, dated entries showing cognitive function over 3 years. Margaret, this is the kind of evidence that wins cases. What do we need beyond this? He made a list on his legal pad. Medical records from Dr. Morrison. We need official documentation that Robert maintained mental capacity throughout his illness. Financial records showing the loans Brad and Jennifer never repaid. Corroborates what Robert wrote in his journals. Communication records, emails, phone logs, to refute any claim that you isolated him from his children. And we need witnesses. People who saw you and Robert together, who can testify to the genuine nature of your relationship and his clear mental state. I can get you names. Good. Let's start with the medical records. Dr. Richard Morrison's office was in the cancer center where Robert had received treatment. Familiar beige walls, antiseptic smell, magazines in the waiting room I'd read 100 times during chemotherapy days. Dr. Morrison remembered me immediately. "Margaret!" He shook my hand, gestured to his consultation room. I was so sorry to hear about Robert, and now this legal situation. How can I help? I explained what Brad and Jennifer were claiming, diminished capacity, that Robert hadn't known what he was doing when he updated his will. Dr. Morrison's face hardened. That's simply not true. Robert was lucid throughout his entire course of treatment. We discussed complex medical decisions, treatment options, clinical trials, palliative care choices. He understood everything, made informed decisions consistently. Can you provide documentation? He pulled Robert's medical file, thick, years of records. These charts document every appointment, every evaluation. We do cognitive assessments as part of cancer care, especially with elderly patients. Robert's assessments were consistently normal, no cognitive decline, no confusion, clear decision-making capacity until the end. He showed me the evaluations, forms with boxes checked, notes in margins. Patient-oriented ×3, makes own medical decisions, clear understanding of prognosis. Over and over, the same assessment, lucid, capable, aware. His last appointment was October 3rd, Dr. Morrison said, 1 month before he died. He came in for pain management consultation. I have notes here. He discussed end-of-life wishes, confirmed his DNR status, talked about his estate planning. He mentioned you specifically, said he wanted to make sure you were taken care of. That was his phrase, taken care of. My throat tightened. You'll provide this documentation to my attorney? Absolutely, and I'll provide testimony if needed. Robert was my patient for 3 years. I knew his mind. There was no diminished capacity, none. I left with a promise that Dr. Morrison would send his records and a written statement to David within the week. Evidence 3 secured. Back at home, I dove into Robert's financial files. David needed documentation of the loans, proof that Brad and Jennifer had borrowed money and never repaid it. I found them in a folder labeled Family, loan agreements Robert had drawn up himself. Simple documents but legally drafted, signed and dated. Brad Walsh, $15,000, dated June 2021. Purpose, temporary assistance during divorce proceedings. Repayment terms, when able. No payments ever recorded. Jennifer and Jeff Morrison, $25,000, dated March 2022. Purpose, business investment capital. Repayment terms, within 2 years or when business profitable. No payments recorded. Business never materialized. I made copies, added the bank statements showing the transfers, large withdrawals from Robert's savings account, matching dates on the loan agreements, deposits into Brad's checking account, transfer to Jeff's business account. Then I found something else. Recent statements from the past year, multiple smaller withdrawals, 500 here, 1,000 there. Robert taking money out to cover our medical expenses, the co-pays, the prescriptions, the home modifications, and transfers in, from my account to his. The $45,000 I'd contributed, documented, dated. Proof that I wasn't taking from Robert. I was giving to him. David had said they'd paint me as calculating. These records showed reality. I'd spent my retirement savings caring for my husband. His children had borrowed and never repaid. The evidence was black and white. David received another piece of documentation from Robert's estate attorney, Theodore Walsh. I'd met Ted briefly when Robert updated his will. Older man, maybe 70, practiced estate law for 40 years. Ted's letter to David was detailed. I met with Robert Walsh on November 12, 2023, at his request to update his last will and testament. Mr. Walsh contacted my office directly and scheduled the appointment himself. His wife, Margaret Walsh, was not present at his request. During our consultation, Mr. Walsh was lucid, oriented, and displayed clear understanding of his assets and their distribution. He specifically discussed his children's financial history, including loans he had extended that remained unpaid. He expressed concern that his children expected his entire estate despite having received significant financial assistance during his lifetime. Mr. Walsh stated clearly his intention to leave his primary residence and the majority of his estate to his wife Margaret, citing her sacrifice of employment and personal finances to care for him during his illness. He instructed specific bequests of $50,000 each to his children, Brad Walsh and Jennifer Walsh Morrison. I asked Mr. Walsh 3 separate times during our meeting whether he was certain of these distributions. Each time he confirmed his decision clearly and rationally. There were no signs of confusion, coercion, or undue influence. Mr. Walsh executed his will in the presence of 2 witnesses who were neither family members nor beneficiaries. The execution was legally proper in all respects. In my professional opinion, based on 40 years of practice, Robert Walsh possessed full testamentary capacity and acted of his own free will when executing his last will and testament. Ted's statement was gold, a professional opinion from an experienced estate attorney, documentation that Robert initiated the meeting, that he was questioned multiple times, that his reasoning was clear. 4 pieces of evidence now: the journal, the medical records, the financial documentation, the attorney's statement, each one building on the others, each one proving Robert knew exactly what he was doing. David coordinated the witness list. Patricia agreed immediately to testify. She'd seen Robert and me together nearly every day for 3 years, witnessed his lucidity, our relationship, my caregiving. Helen from the art class where we'd met, she agreed too. Could speak to our courtship, the slow development of our relationship, how genuine it was from the beginning. Robert's financial advisor, Tom Patterson, would testify about Robert's clear-minded handling of his investments and estate planning discussions. 3 witnesses ready. More if we needed them. People who'd seen our life together, who'd witnessed Robert's capacity, who could contradict Brad and Jennifer's narrative with simple truth. Then I found one more thing. Going through Robert's desk drawer, sorting papers for David, I found an envelope, unsealed, a card inside. Valentine's Day card, the kind you buy at a drugstore. Envelope addressed to me in Robert's handwriting, but never given, never mailed. I opened it, read the message he'd written inside. My Margaret. Another February together. I'm grateful for each one. The doctors say I probably won't see many more, but that's okay. I've had 15 years with you. Some men don't get 15 days of what we've had. You think I don't notice the sacrifices, your job, your savings, your whole life rearranged around my illness. I notice. I'm grateful. I'm humbled. This is why I updated the will, not because you asked. You never would. Because you earned it. Because you deserve security. Because loving you was the easiest decision I ever made, and taking care of you now is the last thing I can do. Brad and Jennifer won't understand. They'll see numbers and feel cheated, but they got their inheritances already, in college tuitions and house down payments and bailout checks. You're getting yours now. The house, security, peace. I love you. Still my best choice. Robert. The card was dated January 2024, 9 months before he died. Clear handwriting, shaky, but legible. Clear mind. Loving, rational, intentional. I sat at his desk holding that card, crying and also feeling something else. Vindication, maybe. Or just love. Evidence that Robert had thought this through. That his choice to leave me the house wasn't last-minute confusion or my manipulation. It was deliberate, thought out, written down in his own words months before he died. I called David, told him about the card. Bring it in, he said. That's powerful evidence. His own words, months before death, explaining his reasoning. Margaret, we have a strong case, a very strong case. That evening, Patricia came by with coffee and questions. How's it going? she asked. I showed her everything. The medical records, the financial statements, the attorney's letter, the Valentine's card. She read through it all slowly, her expression shifting from sympathetic to fierce. They don't have a chance, she said finally. Margaret, honey, you've got documentation most people only dream of. Robert left you a roadmap. I just want it to be over. It will be. And when it is, Brad and Jennifer are going to have to live with the fact that their father chose you in writing, multiple times, with witnesses. I sat in Dr. Morrison's office looking at Robert's medical charts. The word lucid appeared again and again in the notes. Patient-oriented, clear decision-making, no cognitive impairment. Page after page, evaluation after evaluation. They were calling our marriage abuse, but the evidence showed something else. Robert had been clear-headed, certain, capable, until the very end. Will you testify? I asked Dr. Morrison. If it goes to trial? Without hesitation, he said. Robert was my patient. I knew his mind. I won't let his memory be distorted by people who weren't there. I drove home in the afternoon light, thinking about evidence and proof and truth. Robert's journals, his medical records, the attorney's statement, the financial documentation, the Valentine's card, each piece building on the others, each piece showing the same story. A man in full possession of his faculties, making deliberate choices about his estate and his wife. Brad and Jennifer had hired an aggressive attorney, but aggression without evidence is just noise. We had evidence. We had proof. We had Robert's own words, his doctor's professional opinion, his attorney's sworn statement, and his financial records showing reality. We had truth, and that had to count for something. The deposition was scheduled for 2 weeks later. David spent 3 days preparing me, going over potential questions, teaching me how to answer clearly and calmly, warning me that Tom Whitman would try to provoke me. He wants you emotional, David said, flustered, angry. That plays into their narrative that you're unstable or manipulative. Stay calm. Answer only what's asked. If you don't know, say you don't know. Don't elaborate. I can do that. I know you can. He adjusted his glasses. But it won't be easy. They're going to attack your character, your motivations, your marriage. Remember, it's theater, legal theater. Don't take it personally. Easy for him to say. The deposition took place at Whitman and Associates, Tom Whitman's law firm. Steel and glass building downtown, 20th floor, conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Brad and Jennifer were already there when I arrived. First time I'd seen them since the funeral. Brad looked the same. 48, graying hair, expensive suit. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Jennifer sat beside him, hands folded, staring at the table. She looked tired, older than 46. I felt a flash of something, not quite sympathy, maybe just sadness that it had come to this. Tom Whitman was exactly what I expected. Late 50s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. He shook my hand with practiced courtesy that didn't reach his expression. Mrs. Walsh, thank you for being here today. David sat beside me. Court reporter at the end of the table. Everyone settled. Whitman began. Mrs. Walsh, how old were you when you married Robert Walsh? 53. And he was? 58. 5 years older than you. Yes. Had you been married before? Yes. My first husband died 7 years before I met Robert. And Robert had been married before as well. Yes, his first wife died 5 years before we met. Whitman made notes. When did you first meet Robert? At a community center art class, 7 years after my first husband passed. I'd taken up watercolor painting. And Robert was also taking this class? Yes. Did you know when you met him that he was a widower? Not immediately. We got coffee after the second class. He mentioned it then. Did you know he had adult children? Yes. He talked about Brad and Jennifer. Did you know he owned property? Had retirement accounts? I felt the first flicker of irritation. David's hand touched my arm lightly, a reminder. Stay calm. I knew he worked in commercial real estate. I assumed he was financially stable. We didn't discuss his finances early in our relationship. But you did discuss them eventually? When we got engaged, yes, we discussed practical matters. Both of us had been married before. We knew to be clear about expectations. What were those expectations? That we'd build a life together, share expenses, take care of each other. Take care of each other financially? Emotionally, practically, the way married people do. Whitman smiled slightly, not friendly. Mrs. Walsh, when did Robert's cancer diagnosis occur? 8 years into our marriage. He was 66. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer? Yes. Poor prognosis. The doctors gave him 18 months to 2 years. And how did your life change after his diagnosis? I quit my job to care for him full time. He needed help with appointments, treatments, medications, daily activities as the disease progressed. Did you have income after you quit your job? No. We lived on Robert's retirement income and savings. Did you contribute financially to his care? I hesitated. This felt like a trap. But David had told me, truth is your defense. Yes, I used money from my retirement savings to cover medical expenses that insurance didn't pay for. How much? Approximately $45,000 over 3 years. $45,000. Whitman wrote that down carefully. And did Robert know you were spending your savings on his care? I don't know if he tracked it exactly, but he knew I was helping with expenses. Did he reimburse you? No, he was my husband. I wasn't looking for reimbursement. Very generous. Whitman's tone suggested he didn't believe it. Mrs. Walsh, when did Robert update his will? November 2023, 6 months before he died. Were you present when he met with his attorney? No. Robert met with David Chen, Mr. Chen alone. Did you know he was updating the will? Yes. He told me he wanted everything clear, no confusion after he passed. Did you discuss the contents of the will? He told me I would inherit the house and his primary assets, that Brad and Jennifer would receive specific bequests. How much were those bequests? $50,000 each. And the house was worth? Approximately $425,000. So you inherited nearly 6 times what his children inherited? I felt heat rise in my face, David's hand on my arm again, steady. I inherited the home we shared. Robert's decision was that I needed security. His children had received financial help throughout his life, college educations, down payments on homes, loans that were never repaid. Loans that were never repaid, Whitman repeated. Did Robert discuss those loans with you? Yes. He mentioned them. He felt Brad and Jennifer had already received their inheritances during his lifetime. Convenient reasoning. David spoke up. Counselor, do you have a question? Whitman smiled thinly. Mrs. Walsh, isn't it true that you encouraged Robert to change his will? No. You never discussed it with him? Never suggested he leave you more? Never. The will was Robert's decision. His choice. His choice while he was dying of cancer, while he was dependent on you for care, while he was vulnerable. Now I felt anger, real anger, but David's training held. Robert was dying of pancreatic cancer, but his mind was clear. Dr. Morrison can confirm that. Robert made his own decisions about his medical care, about his estate, about everything until the day he died. You say his mind was clear, but you're not a doctor, are you, Mrs. Walsh? No, but I was with him every day. I know what I saw. What you saw, what you wanted to see, perhaps. David interrupted again. Counselor, you're testifying. Do you have questions for my client? Whitman shifted topics. Mrs. Walsh, how often did Brad and Jennifer visit their father during his illness? 2 or 3 times a year. Sometimes more toward the end. And did you restrict their access to him? Absolutely not. Did you monitor their phone calls with him? No. Did you read their emails to him? No. Robert managed his own communications. But you were always present during their visits. Usually, it was my home too, but I gave them privacy when they asked for it. When they asked. So you controlled when they had privacy with their dying father. I took a breath. Another. David had warned me about this. Twisting words, making innocent actions sound sinister. I offered them privacy. They usually declined. They preferred to visit as a family, all of us together. Or perhaps they were uncomfortable being alone with Robert because you'd isolated him from them. That's not true. No. When was the last time Brad or Jennifer saw their father alone without you present before he died? I thought back. Tried to remember. I don't know exactly. Maybe the hospital visit a month before he passed. I stepped out so they could talk. You stepped out. Because you allowed it. Because I thought they might want privacy to say goodbye. How thoughtful. Whitman's sarcasm was barely veiled. Mrs. Walsh, did Robert ever express doubt about the will, about leaving you such a large inheritance? No, he was certain. Never wavered? Never. Not even when Brad or Jennifer expressed concern? They didn't express concern to him, at least not that he told me about. Perhaps because he was afraid of how you'd react. David's voice was sharp. Objection, speculation, counselor, you're leading the witness into areas where she can't possibly have knowledge of Robert's internal thoughts. I'll rephrase. Whitman looked at me again. Did Robert ever tell you that Brad or Jennifer questioned the will? I thought about Robert's journal entries, about Brad asking about the house, but Whitman was asking what Robert told me, not what he wrote. Robert mentioned that Brad seemed interested in the house value, in what would happen to it after Robert died, but Robert didn't characterize it as questioning the will. Interested in the house value, his childhood home, the home where he grew up. Seems natural, doesn't it? It does. And yet you inherited that home, that childhood home, instead of his children. Robert made that choice, not me. Robert made that choice. A dying man, dependent on you, grateful to you, influenced by you. Influenced by reality, I said. My voice was firmer now. I cared for him for 3 years. I gave up my income, my savings, my time. Brad and Jennifer visited a handful of times. Robert saw that. He made his decision based on what he observed, not what I told him to think. So you're saying you earned that inheritance? That your care was worth $425,000 plus retirement accounts? I'm saying I loved my husband, and he chose to take care of me the way I took care of him. That's called marriage. Whitman studied me. I held his gaze. I was done being defensive, done explaining. Robert had made his choice. These documents proved it. His journals, his medical records, his attorney's statement, all of it showed a man thinking clearly, choosing deliberately. No further questions? Whitman said finally. We broke for lunch. David walked me out of the conference room, down to the building's coffee shop. You did well, he said. Better than well. You stayed composed, answered clearly. He's going to paint me as a gold digger no matter what I say. He's going to try, but we have the evidence, the journals, the medical records, the attorney's statement. They prove Robert's capacity and intent. Whitman can insinuate all he wants. Proof beats insinuation. During our break, David showed me something on his phone. Brad's social media posts from the past year. Public posts, not private. Photos from Hawaii, from Europe, expensive restaurants, luxury hotels. One caption caught my eye. Making memories before reality hits. Enjoy it while you can. Posted 3 months before Robert died. Another. Family legacy matters. Some things should stay in the family. Posted 2 months before Robert died. David watched my face as I read. He was already thinking about the inheritance, already planning, While his father was dying, he was on vacation and posting about family legacy. Something clicked into place. This wasn't about Robert's capacity. It wasn't about whether our marriage was real. It was about entitlement, about Brad and Jennifer feeling they deserved more, about them deciding their father's choice wasn't good enough. They don't care about Robert, I said quietly. They care about the money. Most will contests are about money, David said. That's why we'll win. Because we're defending Robert's choice. They're defending their disappointment. I drove home alone after the deposition. Didn't want company. Needed time to think, to process what had happened in that conference room. When I got home, I went straight to the garden. Robert's roses were in full bloom. He'd have been pleased. I found the pruning shears in the shed and started working. Precise cuts, intentional. Dead wood removed, healthy growth encouraged. Robert had taught me this. Don't be afraid to cut, he'd say. Roses recover, they grow stronger. I'd been too gentle before, afraid to hurt the plant, but Robert was right. Pruning was about helping, not harming, about removing what was dead so the living part could thrive. After half an hour, I stepped back. The rose bushes looked cleaner, healthier, ready for new growth. I thought about the deposition, about Whitman's questions, about Brad and Jennifer sitting there, letting their attorney tear apart my marriage. My life with Robert. I'd gone into that conference room as the grieving widow, defensive, apologetic, trying to explain myself to people who'd already decided I was guilty. But sitting in that garden, looking at the roses I'd just pruned, I realized something. I wasn't on trial. Robert's choice was. And Robert's choice was documented, witnessed, legally sound and morally right. I took off my wedding ring, the one Robert had given me 15 years ago. Gold band, simple design, worn smooth from years of wear. I looked at it in the afternoon sunlight. Then I put it on my right hand instead. Same ring, different position. I wasn't the grieving widow begging for understanding anymore. I was the wife defending her husband's final wishes. Robert had chosen me, chosen our life together, chosen to take care of me the way I'd taken care of him. Brad and Jennifer could hire the most aggressive attorney in the state. They could twist words and insinuate motives and question my character. But they couldn't change the evidence, couldn't erase Robert's journals or his doctor's records or his attorney's statement, couldn't rewrite reality to match their disappointment. I stood in the garden that evening, looking at our house, the life we'd built, the roses Robert had planted, the modifications I'd paid for when he needed wheelchair access, the kitchen where I'd cooked his meals, the bedroom where I'd held his hand as he died. Robert knew what he was doing when he updated that will. He'd always known. He was stubborn, clear-minded, and certain about everything that mattered. His children couldn't stand that his final certainty was about me, about us, but that was their problem, not mine. Mediation was scheduled in 3 weeks. I'd spend that time gathering the rest of our evidence, building an unassailable case, not with anger, with precision. Robert's final gift to me wasn't just the house, it was clarity, about what mattered, about what was worth fighting for, about the difference between love and entitlement. I wouldn't waste it. 3 weeks to mediation. David filed our response to Brad and Jennifer's petition. Comprehensive, documented, backed by Robert's journals, medical records, and attorney statements. Tom Whitman responded with a motion claiming I'd isolated Robert from his children during his final months. The accusation was strategic. If they could prove isolation, they could argue undue influence. Paint me as controlling, manipulative, someone who'd cut Robert off from his family to secure the inheritance. David wasn't worried. "They're grasping," he said over coffee at his office. "We have phone records, email correspondence, visitor logs from hospice. The evidence shows Robert maintained regular contact with Brad and Jennifer." I'd gathered those records myself, pulled Robert's cell phone bills from the filing cabinet, printed email threads from his account, invitations I'd sent for holidays, updates on his condition, requests for visits. Most went unanswered or declined. "Can't make it this time." Schedule's tight. Maybe next month. The hospice visitor log showed the truth starkly. Robert's final 2 months. Brad visited 3 times. Jennifer 4 times. Each visit logged. Date, time, duration, no restrictions, no denied access, just their own choices. Patricia had witnessed some of those visits. I remember Jennifer's car in your driveway maybe twice a month those last weeks, she'd told me. And Brad, I saw him at Christmas, maybe once in January, that was it. David compiled everything into a counter motion. Phone records proving Robert called them regularly, emails showing my invitations, hospice logs showing open access, Patricia's witness statement confirming what she'd observed. This isolation claim won't stand, David said, but they had to try something. They know the medical evidence kills their diminished capacity argument, so they're pivoting to undue influence. A week before mediation, Ted Walsh, Robert's estate attorney, sent a detailed affidavit to David. I read it in David's office, sitting in the chair that was becoming familiar. Ted's statement was thorough, professional, damning to Brad and Jennifer's case. He described Robert's November 2023 appointment in detail, how Robert scheduled it himself, how he arrived alone, clear-minded, prepared with notes, how Ted asked him 3 separate times whether he was certain about the will's terms, how Robert confirmed each time without hesitation. Ted quoted Robert directly from his notes. "My children have borrowed money they haven't repaid. They've had help with houses, cars, college for their kids. They've had their inheritance already. Margaret's given up everything to care for me. She deserves security." The affidavit included Ted's professional opinion as an estate attorney with 40 years of experience. Robert Walsh possessed full testamentary capacity. He understood his assets, his beneficiaries, and the implications of his decisions. There was no evidence of coercion, confusion, or undue influence. The will was executed properly in all respects. David looked satisfied as he filed the affidavit with the court. Between this and Dr. Morrison's medical records, they have no case for incapacity, and the isolation claim is dead with the phone records. They're running out of ammunition. Tom Whitman's next move came 4 days before mediation. His office called David with a settlement offer. I was at home when David phoned. "They want to negotiate," he said. "Avoid mediation. Tom's proposing you keep 40% of the estate. The house gets sold, proceeds split 3 ways between you, Brad, and Jennifer." I did the math quickly. 40% of $800,000, $320,000. The house sold divided. I'd get maybe $140,000 from that. Total, $460,000. Not nothing, but not what Robert intended. "What do you think?" I asked. "It's not a terrible offer financially. You'd walk away with substantial money, no more legal fees, no more stress. Clean break." I thought about it, about ending this, about not having to sit through mediation, face Brad and Jennifer across a conference table, listen to their attorney twist my marriage into something ugly. Then I thought about Robert, about his journal entries, about his clear instruction. Margaret deserves the house, our home, about his reasoning, documented in his own handwriting, dated and detailed. "No," I said. "Robert left me that house. He wanted me to have our home. If I take this settlement, I'm saying he didn't know what he was doing, that our marriage was questionable. I won't do that." David was quiet for a moment. "You're sure? This is guaranteed money. Mediation's not guaranteed." "I'm sure. Robert made his choice. I'm defending that choice." "Then we go to mediation with everything we have," David said. "No holding back." "Everything," I agreed. But Whitman wasn't done. 2 days before mediation, something new arrived. Jennifer had provided evidence, emails I'd sent to Robert during his cancer treatment. Their attorney claimed the tone was manipulative, controlling. David forwarded them to me. I read through messages I'd written 2-3 years ago, reminders about appointments, medication schedules, dietary restrictions, logistics of caregiving. Don't forget Dr. Morrison at 2 p.m. tomorrow. I'll drive. The pharmacy called. Your prescription's ready. I'll pick it up this afternoon. Honey, you need to eat something, even if it's just soup. Please try. They were calling this manipulative. These messages to my dying husband, trying to keep him comfortable, keep him nourished, keep him alive. I felt something shift. Not anger exactly. Clarity. David saw it too when we met. These emails show nothing but caregiving, he said. Whitman's desperate. He's trying to reframe normal spousal care as control. It won't work. He's going to try anyway. Let him. We'll bring in a linguistics expert if we need to. Show that this is standard language between a caregiver and patient. Nothing sinister. Nothing manipulative. Patricia came by that evening with a casserole, tuna noodle, comfort food. She sat with me on the back porch while I told her about the emails. They're really scraping the bottom now, she said, calling you manipulative for reminding Robert to take his medication. For heaven's sake. They need something. The medical records prove he was lucid. The journals prove his reasoning. The attorney's statement proves proper execution. They're running out of arguments. Good. Patricia squeezed my hand. You're doing the right thing. Standing up for Robert's choice. For your marriage. The night before mediation, Brad called. My phone rang at 8 p.m., his number on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. David had told me to record any contact. Margaret. Brad's voice was smooth. Reasonable. Can we talk? I'm recording this call, Brad. My attorney advised it. A pause. Then, that's fine. Look, this whole thing has gotten out of hand. Jennifer and I have been talking. We don't want to drag Dad's name through this. It's not good for anyone. Then why did you file the petition? Because we were hurt, surprised. 50,000 each felt like Dad didn't value us, but we've had time to think. We want to make an offer. I waited. Give us the house, he said. Just the house. You keep everything else. The retirement accounts, life insurance, all of it. We'll drop the case immediately. No mediation, no trial, clean resolution. The house. Our home. The place where Robert and I had built 15 years of life together, where I'd cared for him through cancer, where he died in our bedroom holding my hand. Brad, your father wanted me to have the house, but it's the family home. Jennifer and I grew up there. It means something to us. Dad would understand that. He'd want peace between us. There it was. The manipulation disguised as sentiment, using Robert's memory to justify ignoring his explicit wishes. Brad, I'm recording this, so let me be clear. Robert made his decision. He documented his reasoning. He discussed it with his attorney. He knew you and Jennifer would be upset, and he chose to proceed anyway. That was his right, his choice. Margaret, the answer is no. I'll see you at mediation tomorrow. You'll regret this. The threat was barely veiled. I felt my hand shaking slightly, but my voice stayed steady. Goodbye, Brad. I hung up. Sat there on the porch, phone in hand, recording saved. David would want to hear it, but I didn't feel afraid. I felt clear. Brad's call wasn't about reconciliation. It was about one more attempt to get what he wanted. The house, the inheritance, the validation that their expectations mattered more than their father's choice. Tomorrow we'd sit in a mediation room. Tomorrow Tom Whitman would present their case, diminished capacity, undue influence, isolation, manipulation. All. The arguments they'd built trying to overturn a properly executed will. And tomorrow I'd present ours, Robert's journals, his medical records, Ted Walsh's affidavit, the phone records and emails and hospice logs, the evidence that showed the truth. Robert was competent. Our marriage was genuine. His choice was informed and deliberate. I wasn't going into that room as the defensive widow anymore. I was going in as Robert's defender. His choice had been clear. My job was to make sure it stood. The next morning, I dressed carefully, professional but not severe. Navy suit, simple jewelry, the wedding ring on my right hand, a reminder of why I was doing this. Patricia stopped by with coffee. "You ready?" "As ready as I'll be. You've got this. You've got the evidence, you've got the truth. That counts for something." I hoped she was right. David picked me up at 9. Mediation started at 10. Downtown law office, neutral territory, professional mediator. Brad and Jennifer would be there. Tom Whitman. All of us in one room trying to resolve what Robert's death had started. I thought about Robert's last journal entry, about his certainty, about his knowledge that his children would contest his decision. "Let them try," he'd written. "This is my choice." I was about to make sure his choice stood. The law office conference room was designed for neutrality. Beige walls, long mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Professional, impersonal. A room where families came to negotiate the wreckage of relationships. The mediator arrived first. Carol Anderson, attorney with 30 years of experience in estate disputes. Early 60s, gray suit, calm demeanor. She shook hands with everyone as we entered. Me and David on one side of the table, Brad and Jennifer with Tom Whitman on the other. I hadn't seen Brad and Jennifer since the deposition 3 weeks ago. Brad looked tired. Dark circles under his eyes. Suit slightly rumpled. Jennifer wouldn't look at me. She stared at the table, hands folded, face drawn. For a moment, just a moment, I felt something. Not quite sympathy. Maybe just sadness. These were Robert's children. He'd loved them, wanted them in his life. Wanted me in his life too. Wanted all of us to be family. And here we were, with attorneys and mediators fighting over what he'd left behind. Carol Anderson opened with standard mediation language. Voluntary process, confidential. Goal was resolution without trial. Both sides would present their positions. She'd facilitate discussion. Everyone nodded. Tom Whitman went first. "Ms. Anderson, my clients Brad Walsh and Jennifer Walsh Morrison are here today seeking justice for their father. Robert Walsh was a successful businessman, a devoted father, and a man who unfortunately became vulnerable in his final years due to terminal cancer." I felt David tense beside me. This was the opening salvo. "Our position is straightforward," Whitman continued. "Robert Walsh married the respondent, Margaret Walsh, when he was 58 years old, already an older man. The marriage occurred under questionable circumstances. Within years, Robert developed terminal cancer and became increasingly dependent on Margaret for daily care. During this vulnerable period, Margaret isolated Robert from his children, controlled his communications, and manipulated him into changing his will to disproportionately favor her." Whitman pulled out documents. Robert's original will, executed before his marriage to Margaret, left his estate equally divided between his children. After marrying Margaret and while suffering from terminal illness, he changed that will to leave the majority of his assets, including his family home, to her. My clients received token bequests of $50,000 each, while Margaret inherited over $600,000 in assets. He looked at Carol Anderson. "We believe Robert lacked capacity due to his illness and the influence of heavy medications. We believe Margaret exercised undue influence during his vulnerable state. We're asking the court to set aside the current will and honor Robert's original intentions, that his children inherit his estate." Whitman sat down. Brad and Jennifer remained silent, letting their attorney speak for them. Carol turned to David. "Mr. Chen?" David adjusted his glasses, opened his folder. "Ms. Anderson, this case is about one thing, respecting a man's clearly documented wishes. Robert Walsh was not confused. He was not manipulated. He made a deliberate, informed decision about his estate, a decision he documented extensively." David pulled out Robert's journals. "These are personal journals Robert kept during the final 3 years of his life. Contemporaneous documentation showing clear reasoning, awareness of his family dynamics, and explicit discussion of his estate planning decisions." He read from one entry. "November 10th, 2023. Met with David Chen yesterday to update the will. Margaret asked if I was sure. That woman, always putting everyone else first. Of course I'm sure. Brad borrowed $15,000 2 years ago, said it was temporary, still hasn't paid $1 back. Jennifer's husband wanted $25,000 for his business venture, also unpaid. They've had their inheritance already. Margaret's given me everything. She earned security. David let that sit, then continued. Robert's medical records show consistent mental capacity throughout his illness. Dr. Richard Morrison, his oncologist, documented cognitive assessments at every appointment. No decline, no confusion, clear decision-making until the day he died. He pulled out another document. This is an affidavit from Theodore Walsh, the estate attorney who drafted Robert's will. Mr. Walsh confirms that Robert contacted his office independently, met alone, displayed full mental capacity, and explicitly stated his reasoning for the will's terms. Mr. Walsh asked Robert 3 separate times whether he was certain. Robert confirmed without hesitation. David looked at Brad and Jennifer. My client didn't manipulate Robert. She cared for him. The evidence shows Robert made an informed choice based on observable reality. His children had borrowed money they never repaid, while his wife had sacrificed her career and savings to care for him. That's not manipulation. That's gratitude. Carol made notes. I'd like to hear from the parties directly. Mrs. Walsh, can you walk me through your relationship with Robert and how the will came to be? I'd practiced this. David had prepared me. But sitting there, with Brad and Jennifer across the table, it felt different, more real. Robert and I met at an art class 7 years after I was widowed, I began. My voice was steady. We dated for 2 years before marrying. Slow courtship. We were both older, both cautious, both knew what we wanted. When we married, Robert's children were part of the ceremony, part of our life. I never tried to replace their mother. I was just Margaret, Robert's wife. I pulled out the photo album I'd prepared, opened it on the table. This documents our 15 years together, our wedding. Brad and Jennifer are in this photo, anniversaries, trips we took, holiday dinners. Then the cancer diagnosis, 8 years in. These photos show Robert during treatment, clear-minded, smiling despite everything, making decisions about his care. I turned pages slowly. Carol Anderson leaned in to look. Even Whitman glanced over. I cared for Robert for 3 years during his illness. I gave up my job, used my retirement savings, $45,000, for medical expenses. I paid $12,000 for wheelchair accessibility modifications to our home. I was there every day. Brad and Jennifer visited a few times a year. That was their choice. I never restricted access, never monitored calls, never controlled communications. I pulled out the phone records. These show Robert called his children weekly. Most calls went to voicemail. He tried. Then the email printouts. These are invitations I sent for holidays, updates on Robert's condition. Most went unanswered. The hospice visitor log shows Brad visited 3 times in Robert's final 2 months. Jennifer 4 times. No restrictions, just their schedules. Carol looked at Brad and Jennifer. Would you like to respond to that? Brad spoke for the first time. His voice was tight. You isolated him from us. The records show otherwise, I said quietly. You convinced him we were irresponsible. Your father observed that himself. You borrowed $15,000 and never repaid it. Jennifer's husband borrowed $25,000, also unpaid. Robert documented that in his journal, his own observation, not my influence. Jennifer finally spoke. Her voice cracked slightly. That house should be ours. We grew up there. I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the grief beneath the anger. I understand this is hard, but that house became our home. Robert and I built a life there. He wanted me to keep it. That was his choice. Convenient choice, Brad said bitterly, made when he was dying, when you were the only one there. Made 6 months before he died, David interjected, when his prognosis was stable, when he was, according to all medical evidence, fully competent. Carol Anderson held up a hand. Let's look at the medical evidence. Mr. Whitman, you've claimed diminished capacity. What evidence do you have? Whitman looked uncomfortable for the first time. The nature of pancreatic cancer, the pain medications Robert was taking, the general stress of terminal illness, all of these factors affect judgment. Do you have medical records showing cognitive impairment? We have the circumstances. Medical records, Mr. Whitman. Documentation of actual diminished capacity. Whitman shuffled papers. We believe the circumstances speak to vulnerability. That's not evidence of incapacity. Carol turned to David. You have medical testimony? David pulled up his laptop, connected it to the screen in the conference room. Dr. Morrison appeared via video deposition. Dr. Morrison, you treated Robert Walsh for 3 years. Can you speak to his mental capacity during that time? Dr. Morrison's voice came through clearly. Robert maintained full cognitive function throughout his illness. We do routine assessments, orientation, memory, decision-making capacity. Robert's assessments were consistently normal. He understood his diagnosis, his treatment options, his prognosis. He made complex medical decisions independently. There was no cognitive decline. His last appointment, 1 month before death, showed the same clear capacity he'd had from the beginning. Carol made notes. And he was on pain medications. Yes, but pain medication, properly dosed, doesn't impair capacity. It manages symptoms. Robert's medications were carefully monitored. They didn't affect his cognition. In your professional opinion, did Robert Walsh have the mental capacity to execute a will 6 months before his death? Absolutely, without question. The video ended. Carol turned to Whitman. Do you have medical testimony contradicting this? Whitman's jaw tightened. We have concerns about the timing. Medical testimony, Mr. Whitman. No. Carol made another note. Let's hear from the estate attorney. Mr. Chen? David played the second video. Theodore Walsh appeared on screen. Older man, kind face, professional demeanor. Mr. Walsh, you drafted Robert Walsh's will in November 2023? I did. Robert contacted my office himself, scheduled the appointment. He arrived alone at his request. We spent 90 minutes discussing his estate, his assets, his beneficiaries, and his reasoning. Did you have concerns about his capacity? None whatsoever. Robert was lucid, organized, clear about his intentions. I asked him 3 separate times during our meeting whether he was certain about the distribution. I do this routinely, but especially in cases where children are receiving less than they might expect. Robert confirmed his decision each time. He was firm, certain. He even anticipated that his children might contest the will. His exact words, from my notes, "Let them try. This is my choice. Margaret deserves this." In your professional opinion, did Robert Walsh execute his will freely and with full capacity? Yes. It was one of the clearest cases I've handled. Robert knew exactly what he was doing and why. The video ended. Silence in the conference room. Carol Anderson looked at Tom Whitman. Mr. Whitman, you've claimed undue influence. Do you have evidence of actual coercion, threats, manipulation? Whitman leaned forward. The circumstances themselves constitute undue influence. Margaret was the sole caregiver. Robert was dependent on her. That creates a power dynamic. That's not evidence of undue influence, Carol said. That's speculation about a power dynamic. Do you have evidence of threats? Of isolated incidents where Margaret prevented Robert from seeing his children or speaking with his attorney? The emails Margaret sent Robert during his illness show controlling language. I've reviewed those emails, Carol interrupted. They show standard caregiving, communication, medication reminders, appointment schedules, dietary suggestions. That's not manipulation, that's spousal care. Whitman's frustration was showing. The outcome speaks for itself. Margaret gets the house, over $600,000 in assets. The children get token amounts. That's not fair. Fair isn't the legal standard, Carol said. "The question is whether the will reflects Robert's true wishes, executed with capacity and without coercion. From the evidence presented, it appears it does." Brad's voice rose. "You're just going to let her get away with this?" "Get away with what?" Carol asked calmly. "Honoring her husband's documented wishes? She manipulated him. Where's your evidence? I've seen journals showing Robert's clear reasoning, medical records showing his capacity, an attorney's sworn statement that Robert understood and intended every word of his will. What evidence do you have that contradicts this?" Brad looked at Jennifer. "At Whitman." No one spoke. Carol turned to me. "Mrs. Walsh, do you have anything else you'd like to add?" I looked at Brad and Jennifer, at Robert's children, now in their mid-40s, sitting across from me with anger and grief and disappointment in their faces. "I do," I said. I leaned forward, hands flat on the conference table, kept my voice level. This was the moment, the thing I needed them to hear. Robert was my husband for 15 years. I met him at an art class. We dated for 2 years before we married. Took our time, made sure. I cared for him through cancer, 3 years of appointments, treatments, hard decisions. I held his hand when he died. You're trying to rewrite our story because you don't like how it ended financially, but I won't let you erase what we had. I looked directly at Brad, then Jennifer. His will stands. His choice was clear. He documented his reasoning in journals, confirmed it with his attorney, discussed it with his doctor. He knew you'd be upset. He chose to proceed anyway because he believed I'd earned security and you'd already received help. My voice was steady, firm, not angry, just done. If you can't accept that with the evidence we've shown today, we'll see you in court. But I'm done negotiating. I'm done defending my marriage. Robert's wishes are documented. I'm honoring them. I sat back. The room was quiet. Brad and Jennifer looked at each other. Tom Whitman whispered something to Brad. Carol Anderson closed her folder. I'm going to call a 2-hour recess. I want both parties to confer with their attorneys. Consider what we've discussed. When we reconvene, I'd like to hear whether there's any possibility of resolution. She stood. Everyone stood. David guided me out of the conference room, down to the building's coffee shop. You did perfectly, he said, everything we needed them to hear. I just felt tired of defending, tired of explaining, tired of proving that my love was real, but also clear, clearer than I'd been in months. When I finished speaking, the room was quiet. I felt Robert there with me, not vindication, just clarity. This was the right fight. We sat in the coffee shop for 90 minutes. David reviewed notes. I drank coffee that tasted like cardboard, watched people in the building go about their normal days while mine hung in balance. Finally, David's phone buzzed. Text from Tom Whitman. Ready to reconvene. We went back upstairs, back to the conference room. Brad and Jennifer were already there. They looked different. Deflated, maybe. Or just resigned. Carol Anderson settled into her chair. We've had productive discussions during the break. Mr. Whitman, would you like to share your client's position? Whitman looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. My clients have reconsidered. After reviewing the evidence presented today, they've agreed to withdraw their contest of Robert Walsh's will. I felt David's hand squeeze my shoulder. Carol nodded. What are the terms? The will stands as written. Mrs. Walsh inherits the house and primary assets as stipulated. Brad Walsh and Jennifer Walsh Morrison receive their $50,000 bequests. However, my clients note that Robert's journals referenced loans of $15,000 and $25,000 respectively. They propose those amounts be deducted from their bequests. Brad Walsh would receive $35,000, Jennifer Walsh Morrison $25,000, and Mrs. Walsh would retain those loan amounts. Carol looked at me. Mrs. Walsh? I looked at Brad and Jennifer. They wouldn't meet my eyes. That's acceptable, I said. I agree to those terms. Any conditions? David spoke up. We request that future communication between Mrs. Walsh and Mr. Walsh or Ms. Walsh Morrison be conducted through attorneys. Given the acrimony of these proceedings, our client prefers formal distance." "Agreed," Whitman said quietly. Carol made final notes. "Then we have resolution. The will of Robert James Walsh, dated November 12, 2023, will stand as written with the modifications to the specific bequests as discussed. All parties will sign settlement documents within 5 business days. This matter is closed." She stood, shook hands with everyone, professional, efficient. Another case resolved. Brad and Jennifer left without speaking to me. Tom Whitman gave David a curt nod and followed his clients out. David and I stood alone in the conference room, windows overlooking the city, afternoon light coming through. "We won," David said. "Robert won," I corrected. His choice stood. "Because you fought for it." I thought about that, about the past 3 months, the letter arriving that Tuesday morning, the journals discovered in Robert's desk, the depositions and motions and mediations, the evidence we'd gathered, the truth we'd proven. "I defended what was real," I said. "That's all." We walked out of the building into October afternoon sunshine. The same month, Robert had died. 1 year later, full circle. I drove home alone, sat in my driveway for a few minutes before going inside. The house was still standing, still mine, still ours. Robert's choice had stood. That was what mattered. The settlement documents arrived at David's office 3 days later. I signed them in his conference room, the same space where we'd planned strategy, reviewed evidence, built the case that Robert's choice would stand. "It's done," David said as I handed back the pen. "The estate will close within 60 days. The house will be deeded to you. Robert's retirement accounts and life insurance will transfer. Brad and Jennifer will receive their modified bequests. $35,000 and $25,000 respectively, with the loan amounts retained by you." I looked at the numbers on the settlement document. The estate total, $796,000 after legal fees and final expenses. The house, $425,000. Retirement accounts, $280,000. Life insurance, $91,000. My legal fees, $34,000. Final inheritance, approximately $680,000. Security, the thing Robert had wanted me to have. "Thank you," I said to David, "for everything. You did the hard part. You stood your ground." 2 months later, the estate closed. Official documents arrived by courier. The house deed with my name alone. Margaret and Walsh, sole owner. Transfer confirmations from the retirement account custodians. Life insurance payout deposited. Robert's financial life, now mine to steward. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd read the certified letter 8 months ago, and looked at the paperwork. It was over. The legal battle, the accusations, the defense of my marriage, all of it, finished. But some things weren't finished. Some consequences lingered. Brad sent one email after the settlement, not to me, through David, as the agreement required. Subject line, "This isn't over." Body, 3 words, "Watch your back." David forwarded it to me with a note. "Save this. Document any further contact. He's angry, but he has no legal recourse. His threat is empty." I saved it. Filed it with all the other documents, evidence of who Brad really was, who he'd chosen to be. Jennifer sent nothing, just silence. I'd hoped, maybe foolishly, that she might reach out, that some part of her might acknowledge what had happened, but silence was its own message. The relationship, whatever it had been, was over. I grieved that, not the way I'd grieved Robert, but grief nonetheless. For the family that might have been, for the stepchildren who might have accepted me, for Robert's hope that we could all be connected. That possibility was gone. Brad's threat, Jennifer's silence, the no contact clause, all of it meant the same thing. Robert's children and I were done. I had to accept that. Some bridges burn, some relationships end. You mourn them and move forward, but other connections deepened, unexpected ones. 3 women from my book club reached out in the weeks after the settlement, each facing similar situations: second marriages, adult stepchildren, estate concerns. They wanted advice, wanted to know how I'd managed, what evidence I'd gathered, how I'd defended myself. We started meeting monthly, called ourselves the Second Wives Club, half joking, half serious, shared strategies, documents, attorney referrals, ways to protect ourselves while still being open to love. I never expected to become an advocate, but there I was, helping women navigate the same terrain I'd crossed, teaching them what Robert had taught me through his journals and his clear-minded planning. Document everything. Be transparent. Make your wishes explicit. It gave me purpose, a way to make meaning from what had happened. Patricia stopped by one afternoon, 3 months after the settlement. We sat on the back porch with coffee, watching the garden bloom. "You did it," she said. "You stood up for yourself, for Robert." I just defended the truth. More than that, you showed the rest of us how. She paused. "I've been thinking about my own situation. My daughter's been pressuring me about the condo, wants me to sell, move into assisted living, put the money in trust for her. But I'm 70. I'm healthy. I'm not ready." "Then don't." I wasn't sure I could say no, but watching you, how you stood firm, it helped me see. She smiled. "I told Sarah last week, I'm keeping the condo. It's mine. I'll move when I'm ready, not when it's convenient for her." "How'd she take it?" "Not well, but that's her problem." Patricia squeezed my hand. I updated my will, too, made everything crystal clear, named you as backup healthcare proxy if you're willing. "Of course." "We're watching out for each other now," she said. "That's what matters." Our friendship had shifted, deepened. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were allies, women who'd learned to protect ourselves, who understood that loving people didn't mean letting them take advantage. David called me in December, 6 months after the settlement. "I wanted you to know," he said. "I'm adjusting your final bill, taking 30% off what we discussed." "David, you don't have to." "I want to. You taught me something about why I became a lawyer, about protecting people who loved well, who chose carefully, who deserved to have their choices honored." He paused. "I'm referring you to an estate planning specialist. Friend of mine, excellent attorney. You should update your own will now. Make sure everything's clear, protected." I was thinking the same thing. Good. "And Margaret? I'm doing a seminar next month at the Senior Center. Elder law, estate planning, protecting yourself in second marriages. Would you be willing to speak? Share your experience?" I hesitated, then thought about the book club women, about the questions they'd asked, about the help I could offer. "Yes," I said, "I'll speak." "Thank you. People need to hear this, from someone who lived it." After we hung up, I sat with that. The idea that my story, Robert's story, our story, could help others, could prevent other families from tearing themselves apart over money and disappointment and expectations. Maybe that was the real inheritance, not the house, not the financial security, but the knowledge, the clarity, the understanding that love and legal protection both matter. Dr. Morrison sent a handwritten note in January. I found it in my mailbox, his careful script on medical office stationery. "Dear Margaret, I heard through David that the case was resolved. I'm glad. Robert would be proud of how you honored his wishes. I run a support group for cancer caregivers, people who've lost spouses, partners, loved ones to this disease. We meet twice a month at the Cancer Center. I wonder if you'd be interested in joining, not as someone who needs support, though there's always room for that, but as someone who might offer it. Your experience, your strength, could help others navigate their own losses. No pressure, but the offer stands. The group meets Tuesday evenings at 6. With respect, Richard Morrison, MD. I went to the next meeting, sat in a circle with 12 other people, listened to their stories, widows and widowers, adult children who'd cared for dying parents, partners who'd watched cancer take people they loved. When it was my turn, I talked about Robert, about the 3 years of caregiving, about holding his hand as he died, about fighting to honor his final wishes. The grief doesn't end, I told them, but you learn to carry it, to make something meaningful from it, to honor them by living well. After the meeting, 3 people came up to me, asked questions, thanked me for sharing. One woman, maybe 60, pulled me aside. "My husband's children are already circling," she said quietly. "He's not even gone yet, and they're asking about the will. I'm terrified of what happens after." I gave her David's card, told her to document everything, to get legal advice early, to protect herself while she still could. She hugged me. "Thank you." I left that night feeling something I hadn't expected, not just sadness for Robert's absence, but purpose, connection, a way to transform loss into help for others. Spring came, a year since Robert's death. I planted new perennials in the garden, his roses still thriving but now surrounded by fresh growth. Columbine, bleeding heart, bee balm, life continuing, changing, blooming. I met with the estate planning specialist David had recommended. Patricia came with me. We both updated our wills, made everything explicit, created video explanations, legal in our state, where we spoke directly to our beneficiaries about our choices, our reasoning, our sound minds. "If anyone's watching this feeling disappointed," I said to the camera, "know that I made these decisions freely, with full awareness, with love for those I chose to include. This is my choice, my right. Honor it." The attorney saved the video, filed it with my will, another layer of protection, another way to ensure my wishes would stand. I kept the box of Robert's anniversary cards in my closet, pulled them out sometimes when I needed to remember, to feel connected, to hear his voice in my head saying what he'd written, "My Margaret, my best choice." The house was mine now, legally, fully. No one could take it. No one could claim I hadn't earned it. The deed said so. The settlement said so. The evidence had proven it. But more than that, Robert had said so. In his journals, in his conversations with his attorney, in his clear-minded planning, he'd chosen this, chosen me, chosen to take care of me the way I'd taken care of him. That was the real victory. Not winning the legal battle, but knowing that Robert's love was real, that our marriage was genuine, that his final gift to me, security, peace, home, was given freely. Some evenings I sat at the kitchen table with paperwork spread out, financial statements, property records, the deed with my name, physical proof that I'd defended what was real, that I'd stood firm, that I'd honored Robert's choice even when his children tried to erase it. I was 69 now. The house was paid off, my finances were stable, my future was secure. I had work that mattered, helping other women, speaking at seminars, attending the caregiver group. I had friends who understood. I had a life that was mine. Not the life I'd imagined when Robert was alive, but a life, a good one, built on the foundation he'd given me, the security he'd wanted me to have, the independence he'd honored. The kids could have had a relationship with me. Robert had wanted that, had hoped we could all be family, but they'd chosen money over connection, entitlement over acceptance, their anger over his peace. I couldn't fix that, couldn't force them to see what Robert had seen, couldn't make them accept his choice. What I could do was live well, honor his memory, use the security he'd given me to build something meaningful, to help others, to refuse to let bitterness win. That was my inheritance, not just the house and the financial security, but the clarity, the strength, the understanding that love doesn't always look like people expect, that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, that defending your truth is worth the fight. Robert knew that. He'd documented it. He'd planned for it. He'd given me the tools to stand firm, and I had, for him, for us, for the truth of what we'd been together. That's what I'd keep. That's what mattered. 6 months after the settlement, I'm still in the house. Our house. Robert's and mine. Legally secured now. No questions, no challenges. Just mine. I repainted the bedroom that soft blue Robert loved. Updated the kitchen. New countertops, modern appliances. Small changes. The house is evolving. Not erasing Robert. Just making space for the life I'm building now. The garden's thriving. His roses bloom every June, faithful as clockwork. I added the perennials. Columbine, bleeding heart, bee balm, color and life mixing with what Robert planted, growth continuing. I have coffee on the back porch most mornings, read the paper, do the crossword. Still not as good as Robert was, but improving. The routine's mine now. Not lonely, just alone. There's a difference. I'm okay with alone. Patricia stops by Tuesdays and Thursdays. Book Club meets every other Wednesday. The Second Wives Club, our unofficial name for the monthly estate planning discussion group, meets the first Monday. I'm busier now than when Robert was alive. Different kind of busy. Purpose-driven, chosen. The caregiver support group at the Cancer Center meets Tuesday evenings. I've been going for 4 months, helping others process their losses, sharing what I learned about fighting for what's right, about honoring the people we loved by living well. David calls occasionally, updates on his cases, invitations to speak at seminars. Last month, I presented at a senior center downtown. 40 people came, mostly women, mostly second marriages or thinking about them. I talked about documentation, about clarity, about making your wishes explicit so no one can twist them later. 3 women came up afterward with questions. I gave them David's card, told them to protect themselves early, not out of paranoia, out of love, love for themselves, love for the partners who'd want them secure. The mantle still holds the photos. Robert and me at our wedding, anniversaries, trips we took, the visual record of 15 years. I don't avoid looking anymore. Don't feel the sharp stab of grief every time. Just warmth, gratitude, the knowledge that we had something real. His reading glasses are still in the dish by the door. I could move them. Should, probably. But they're part of the house now, part of the landscape of memory. I'll move them when I'm ready. Maybe never. That's okay, too. The anniversary cards are in the closet. I haven't looked at them in months. Don't need to as much. Robert's voice is in my head now, not fading, just integrated. Part of how I think, how I make decisions. What would Robert say? Isn't a desperate question anymore. It's just consultation with someone whose opinion I valued, still value. Brad and Jennifer haven't contacted me. The no contact clause holds. Sometimes I wonder if they think about Robert, about what he wanted, about the choice he made, but mostly I don't think about them at all. They made their decisions. I made mine. We're living with the consequences. I heard, through Patricia, that Jennifer got divorced last spring, that Brad's oldest went to college on student loans, not family money. Part of me feels something about that. Not quite sympathy. Maybe just acknowledgement that life is hard for everyone. That disappointment shapes us all. But I don't reach out. The bridge is burned. Some things can't be repaired. You accept that and move forward. Last month, I updated my will again, made everything crystal clear. The house goes to Patricia's daughter, Sarah. Ironic, given their tension, but Sarah will inherit eventually anyway, and this feels right. My retirement savings split between 3 charities: the Cancer Center, Elder Law Advocacy, and a scholarship fund for caregivers returning to school. Nothing to Brad or Jennifer. That decision was deliberate. A message: you don't inherit from people you tried to destroy. Robert would understand that, might even approve. I recorded the video Will the estate attorney recommended, sat in front of the camera in my living room, and spoke directly to anyone who might watch someday. My name is Margaret Ann Walsh. I'm 70 years old. I'm of sound mind and clear intent. This is my will. These are my choices. I'm making them freely with full understanding of my assets and beneficiaries. If you're watching this feeling disappointed, know that I made these decisions deliberately, with love for those I chose to include, with boundaries for those I chose to exclude. This is my right, my life, my choice. Honor it. The attorney saved the video, filed it with my will, another layer of protection, another way to make sure my voice, my actual voice, speaking my own words, would be heard if someone tried to challenge my wishes. Robert taught me that, through his journals, through his clear planning, through his refusal to let guilt or expectation override what he knew was right. I learned. And I'm passing that knowledge forward. The house is quiet in the evenings. I cook simple meals, nothing fancy, just enough. Watch the news. Read. Sometimes Patricia comes over and we watch old movies, share a bottle of wine, talk about everything and nothing. It's a good life. Not the life I imagined when Robert was alive. Not the life I wanted when he first got sick and I thought we'd have more time. But a good life. Built on the foundation he gave me, the security he wanted me to have, the clarity he modeled. Some people might call me bitter, hardened by the legal battle, changed by having to defend my marriage in court. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am harder now, less willing to accommodate, less concerned with being liked, but I'm also clearer, stronger, more certain about what matters and what doesn't, more protective of my peace, more selective about who gets access to my time and energy and trust. Robert's fight taught me that, or maybe I taught myself using the tools Robert left me. Either way, I'm better for it, more myself, more whole. Spring's coming again. 2 years since Robert died. The roses will bloom soon, the perennials will fill in more. The garden will be fuller this year than last. Growth, change, life insisting on continuing. I'm okay with that. More than okay. I'm embracing it. Because this is what Robert wanted. Not for me to stay frozen in grief, not for me to martyr myself to his memory, but to live, to be secure, to have peace, to build something meaningful from what we had together. I'm doing that. The support group, the seminars, the Second Wives Club, the friendships that deepened, the boundaries that held, the clarity that emerged. This is the inheritance. Not just the house or the money, but the strength, the knowledge, the certainty that I can stand up for myself, that I deserve to, that defending what's right is worth the cost. Robert knew that. He documented it. He planned for it. He gave me the tools. I used them for him, for us, for me, and I'd do it again. If you're listening to this and you're in a second marriage or thinking about one, learn from what happened to me. Document everything. Be explicit about your wishes. Create evidence of your relationship. Keep journals, take photos, save emails. Build a record that shows your life is real and your choices are informed. Talk to an estate attorney. Make your will clear. Consider a video explanation. Name witnesses who can testify to your capacity and your relationship. Protect yourself not because you expect the worst, but because you love the person you're with enough to defend their choices if someone challenges them. Don't assume family will accept your decisions. Don't assume adult children will honor their parents' wishes just because those wishes are documented. People get angry when inheritance doesn't meet expectations. They challenge, they contest, they rewrite history to justify their disappointment. Be ready for that. Not paranoid, just prepared. Because if you have to fight, and you might, you'll need evidence. You'll need documentation. You'll need proof that what you had was real and what you decided was yours to decide. I had that proof. Robert gave it to me, even though he didn't know he'd need to. His journals, his medical records, his attorney's statement, his clear voice saying, "This is my choice." That proof saved me, saved his wishes, saved our marriage from being erased by people who couldn't accept his love for me. Get that proof now, while you can, while the person you love is still here to document their wishes themselves. Don't wait until it's too late. I sit on the back porch this evening, coffee in hand, watching the sunset over the garden. Robert's roses, my perennials, our house behind me, secure, mine, earned. The fight was hard. The accusations hurt. The legal battle drained me emotionally and financially. But I'd do it again. Every deposition, every motion, every piece of evidence gathered and filed and defended, because Robert deserved to have his wishes honored. Our marriage deserved to be defended. And I deserved the security he wanted me to have. I got all three. That's what matters. That's the real victory.